As Western pressure escalates, India remains defiant amid the World Trade Organization's restrictions on subsidized agriculture. The country's commerce minister says that New Delhi won't be pushed around by external forces or bow to threats.
Developed countries signed a one-sided pact to benefit their own farmers before the World Trade Organization was formed. They gave a raw deal to weak and developing nations. India has been fighting for the rights of its farmers and agriculture within the WTO. No one can pressure India. We won't succumb to any pressure.
The Geneva-based WTO set restrictions against exporting state-subsidized crops, saying they lead to unfair prices on global markets. Now, such subsidies allow Indian farmers to grow more wheat and rice, but at lower costs. And New Delhi has said it plans to change the policy to support its domestic farmers and protect the country's food security. India has seen recent tensions with the West over keeping its close relations with Moscow amid the conflict in Ukraine. It has rejected calls from the United States to cut imports of Russian oil, but instead increasing purchases at heavily discounted prices. India is now one of the top consumers of Russian energy, while the US has imposed an embargo on imports of the fuel from Russia. And the US had this to say to New Delhi on its stance.
In my conversations with them, I've said, look, we don't have secondary sanctions, we can't ban your purchases. But as you increase your purchases from Russia, don't go too far, and don't look like you're taking advantage of the pain that is being felt in European households and in the United States.
Earlier, we heard from an Indian political expert who says that the US should treat India like an equal partner if it wants to improve relations with New Delhi.
Well, I think one of the reasons why India's been under so much pressure is because the US expected that India, as an ally of the US, which it is, would cut down or would toe the US line on the embargo on Russian oil. But I think what the West needs to understand is two things. India and Russia's ties are historical. India has the sovereign right to do what is in her self-interest. And India has time and again done when some things are justified, for example, with Venezuela, with Iran. It's worked along with the Western Bloc. But with Russia, India's energy security is paramount, and India needs to secure herself before moving on. And, you know, it's European countries who continue to import oil and gas from Russia. So I think that India's consumption, though increase, is much lesser than all of Europe. And it is Europe that first needs to reduce their purchases before they can lecture India on what India is doing with regards to Russia. The West has to deal with India as an equal partner. And an equal partner it has to understand what are our constraints, what are our restrictions. We are with the West, but at the same time, we cannot spoil our relationship, which is traditional friendship with Russia, who's been a friend and who's been with us through thick and thin. It cannot cut out its oil import, jeopardize its energy security, just because, you know, the Western countries may have a problem with A country, B country, or three countries. I mean, at some point, India has to look at her energy security, which is paramount to her. I again repeat, India has 1.4 billion people. India's energy security is paramount.